Hello everybody, and thank you very much for taking the time out to watch this video. Today I wanted to do an open forum lecture again, and this time on the concept of interstellar spacecraft. I was at a conference recently online and it was talking about this very subject, and I felt really inspired by it, and these were the guys from the Initiative for Interstellar Studies, which I'll come on to later in one of the slides at the end. But if you're interested in this topic, then by all means get involved as we talk about on-orbit manufacture and how we could build these enormous spacecraft.
In today's video for the Worldship and Interstellar Travel Forum, we're going to have a look at the technology roadmap that we've seen before in previous videos, but with a slight change to adapt this concept of futurism and considering interstellar spacecraft. And then what we're going to do, we're going to introduce some interstellar concepts, and there's some beautiful artwork that I'd love to share with everybody. And then we're going to take a look at how on-orbit manufacture could actually be used to build these enormous spacecraft. And finally, we're going to have a very brief technical overview and some of the challenges that face us when trying to build these enormous ships. So here we can see that there's a modified technology roadmap for on-orbit manufacture. Now, you'd have seen a much shorter version of this in previous videos, and there'll be links below so that you can see how it all fits in and as these series develop. But for the concept of interstellar travel and worldships, I think it'd be safe to agree that it's a futuristic capability, and what boxes have been added here on this technology roadmap have been added post-candidate payload for on-orbit demonstrator flight. So in my eyes, in terms of the research, we have a near-term capability for on-orbit manufacture, which would be, for example, a larger facility that makes smaller structural components, and that could be feasible within the next couple of decades. Longer term would be much larger ships, and again, perhaps facilities that orbit, say, the moon or other planets, and that could be between 50 to 100 years. And so futuristic capability with these interstellar spacecraft, we're looking at several generations away and likely not even remotely feasible for a few hundred years, perhaps even towards the end of this millennium. Some of the concepts that have been thought about for interstellar travel have been around for several decades now, and we can see on the screen here that one picture represents an Ensmann Starship, and this was thought up by Dr. Robert Ensmann in the 1960s. And what we have here is a large sphere attached to a crew quarters at the rear and propulsion, and that large sphere is essentially a capsule of what was considered frozen deuterium in terms of millions of tons of deuterium, and it would be the fuel for a nuclear fusion rocket, and that would be the propulsion that would send the crew off onto their interstellar journey. In this slide we can see a Taurus ship concept where you have the crew quarters on the outer ring, and you have the command and control as well as the propulsion in that more central part of the ship there. So again, this is another interstellar concept which would be larger than the Ensmann and potentially could look at hundreds if not thousands of people on board, and depending on the journey time, it has the potential to be an intergenerational spaceship as well. So in this final slide here for the interstellar concepts, we have dry world and wet world spacecraft. Now, these spacecraft are absolutely enormous in idea and what they hope to achieve. And for example, on the right-hand diagram, with the scale, you can see 50 kilometers, and that this particular spacecraft concept is hundreds of kilometers long. And what we have here, the whole dry world and wet world idea, is literally to recreate worlds within a spacecraft. So a dry world could be actual fields and mountains and hills and so forth, and a wet world would have actual shorelines and perhaps islands and so forth. Generally, the entire idea is to replicate Earth, but in spacecraft form. So you can imagine how enormous this spacecraft would need to be, and the systems involved, and just even trying to contemplate how to build this, and this would go certainly towards the end of the millennium in terms of remotely being feasible. So at this point in the open forum video, I'd love to hear your thoughts now on these different concepts, or perhaps you've seen other ideas that you could bring in and provide links so everyone could perhaps look into it as well and add to the discussion. But what do you think of the feasibility of these enormous spacecraft? Is it purely science fiction and something we could never do, or is it something that you think we could really achieve perhaps in a couple of 100 years? Let me know. Add some comments down below, please. So now that we've looked at some concepts for these interstellar spacecraft, the next question I'd like to present to everybody is, how would we build these enormous spacecraft? And this is where I'd like to tie it into on-orbit manufacture. So one concept that I've got, and it's just one of many, and if you've got your own idea, then again, please add that in the comments below. I would love to see what ideas are generated here. But with this slide, we could see that one of the concepts that I've been looking at is how we could make a modular form of spacecraft. Now, in a modular system, we basically build each module separately and we interlink it somehow with a link-like structure, and eventually we come to an assembled world ship. Now, an advantage of this is that we can build different units over time or in different locations and then bring them together. The advantage here being that we could use different sources of material for the on-orbit manufacture. Now, I have another video discussing this very concept of material acquisition, and there'll be links below and at the end of this video, as well as another forum about space mining. So we could see that if we visualize multiple on-orbit manufacture facilities and they are constructing different modules and assemblies, then one idea is that the interstellar spacecraft could move between these facilities as it begins its journey and then merge with the different assemblies at different facilities before it continues its mission. The distance between these different facilities is fairly subjective, but for the purposes of this futuristic video and concept, we could imagine that each of these facilities might be in different solar systems. So there might be material-rich planets, for example, that humanity has visited and colonized, and they would provide the raw materials, and they would build their stage of the larger interstellar spacecraft at their end, and so different stages would then rendezvous as required, and eventually step through the stars. So whilst immediately in, say, the next few 100 years, we might be able to achieve nearby systems for human colonization and exploration, to travel beyond perhaps even the galaxy, then we would certainly need to consider outposts, and perhaps this modular system is one way of approaching this. Let me know your thoughts below in the comments. An alternative concept might be that we actually carry out the on-orbit manufacture operations during the journey itself. So for example, on this slide, we can see a first stage facility that would build the initial module and an on-orbit manufacture module at the front of the spacecraft, let's say. And then what happens is that, again, using the idea of outposts or some other way of providing materials, but a material pod or module would then rendezvous with this interstellar spacecraft, and it would be collected, and then the onboard module for manufacturing would then actually create the space and the infrastructure that's required. So this concept actually looks at having an onboard manufacturing facility and build as you cruise. So again, this concept, like the other, has its pros and cons, and I'd love to hear what you think about this one as well. So as you can imagine, the technical challenges for constructing such enormous spaceships is quite daunting, and I'm not going to go into all of them here, but what I will do is put up here on this slide a compilation of screenshots from a really interesting paper that you can go and download for yourself online, and that's Worldships, Feasibility and Rationale by Hein et al. 2020. And what we've got here is some graphs and tables now of some of the technical challenges that face a world ship. So for example, we've got large population sizes and potential trip duration and some of the work that would need to be done there. But not only that, but we can see from the tables that some of these values for propellant mass and the dry mass of the actual spacecraft is absolutely staggering, and we're looking at billions, if not trillions of tons. And not only that, but then we've got some different preconditions to consider as well, and that includes the biological, cultural, social, technical, economic, and any alternatives that may arise. If you're interested in finding out more about interstellar studies and the whole concept of worldships, then please check out the Initiative for Interstellar Studies online. That's i4is.org. Okay, it's a great community where they discuss all these different concepts, and they often do talks and different lectures in their own right. So be sure to check them out if this is something that you're interested in. So to recap this open forum video for today, we had a look at the technology roadmap and we revised it to consider the implications of futuristic concepts such as the worldships. We then looked at some interstellar concepts and some artwork that has been created over the years along with the concepts. We then thought about how on-orbit manufacture could be used to build these enormous interstellar spacecraft, and we've had a very quick look at some technical challenges and provided some pointers for further reading.
So that concludes today's video and forum on interstellar travel and building worldships. So this concept of on-orbit manufacture for building gigantic spacecraft, in this sense, it's, as I said at the beginning, very much in the future, and I think we're definitely going to be a long way from it, but it's still interesting to consider the possibilities and what, you know, we could look forward to with generations and the centuries to come along. But if you found this video informative and useful, then hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you could be kept up to date with any videos that get released as and when they do, and follow along in the journey. But for now, thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video, and hope you stay safe and take care.